The data point was wrong. It wasn't just slightly off. It was mathematically offensive. I stared at the high-contrast OLED screen of my Trimble R12i GNSS receiver, squinting against the harsh, relentless glare of the high desert sun. The wind out here on the Colorado-New Mexico border didn't just blow. It scraped. It carried a fine, abrasive silica grit that coated my teeth, settled into the seams of my expensive equipment, and etched deep lines into the tanned skin of my face. It was 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. My shirt was plastered to my back, and I could feel the sweat trickling down my temples, but the machine in my hands was perfectly calibrated. It hummed with a quiet electronic efficiency that usually calmed me. Today, however, the discrepancy was making my eye twitch. According to the digital shapefile loaded into my tablet by Apex Land Development, the massive conglomerate paying me 6 figures to map this remote subdivision, the property line should have been exactly 3.4 meters to my left. The vector line on the screen was crisp, decisive, and authoritative. It sliced directly through the center of the dry creek bed, a geological feature that, during the spring melt, would be the only source of surface water for 50 miles. If the map was right, Apex owned the water. They owned the lifeblood of this valley. But the physical reality was arguing with the digital model. And in my line of work, physics always wins. I walked over to the marker, an old, rusted iron pipe driven into the limestone bedrock, leaning slightly to the south like a tired sentry. It was nearly invisible, hidden behind a cluster of sagebrush that had grown wild around it over the decades. I brushed away a tumbleweed, the dry thorns catching on my heavy work gloves, and knelt in the dirt. I pulled a wire brush from my belt loop and scraped away 70 years of oxidation from the cap. There it was, stamped into the metal, faint but legible. Co-survey, 1,950. Marker, 402. I stood up, adjusting the brim of my cap, and wiped the sweat from my neck. I looked at the pipe. I looked at the creek bed. I looked at my tablet. Satellites, 18 locked. Latency, 0, 2S. Vertical accuracy, 1.5 centimeters. The satellites weren't lying. My tech wasn't lying. The math was absolute. The map provided by the client was lying. Someone at Apex had manually shifted the vector lines in the CAD file. It was a subtle fraud, one that would only be caught by someone actually standing in the dirt with a receiver. "Daddy!" The drone is blinking red. A small voice piped up from the bed of the rental truck. I turned. Leo, my 6-year-old son, was sitting cross-legged on the dusty tailgate, his legs dangling over the edge. He was wearing his oversized noise-canceling headphones, a safety precaution I insisted on because job sites were unpredictable variables, heavy machinery, rattlesnakes, sudden storms. He held the controller for the Mavic 3 Enterprise thermal drone like it was a Fabergé egg, his small fingers careful on the joysticks. I walked over, checking the telemetry on his screen. "That's the battery warning, Leo. Voltage is below 15%. The ambient heat is degrading the lithium-ion efficiency faster than the algorithm predicted." "Is it going to crash?" Leo asked, his eyes wide behind his glasses. He hated when things broke. It reminded him too much of the accident, the chaos. "Not on my watch," I said, keeping my voice level. "Panic is an inefficient variable. Initiate the return to home protocol. RTH button. Top left. Press and hold for 3 seconds. Copy that," Leo said, his small thumbs moving with the dexterity of a kid raised on iPads and telemetry. Returning to base, I watched the drone descend, a buzzing gray insect against the vast, terrifying blue of the sky. It landed with a soft mechanical whine on the orange launch pad I'd pegged into the dirt. This job was supposed to be a simple boundary verification, a rubber stamp gig. Optimize the route, collect the cloud point survey, upload the terabytes of data to the cloud, and get paid. It was supposed to be safe, predictable. Since Sarah died 3 years ago, predictable was the only metric I cared about. I didn't do surprises. I didn't do gut feelings. I did data. I did schedules. I kept Leo safe, and I kept my heart in a Faraday cage where no signal could get in or out. But the discrepancy in the fence line was gnawing at me. It was an anomaly. I hated anomalies. They meant inefficient code. They meant human error. Or worse, intentional manipulation. A cloud of dust on the horizon announced an approaching variable. A vehicle. Moving fast. I checked the trajectory. A battered Ford F-250, red paint faded to a matte rust, was bouncing over the cattle guard with a rattle I could hear from a mile away. It was roaring toward us, kicking up a plume of silica dust that would wreak havoc on my optical sensors if I didn't cover them immediately. I didn't flinch. I just calculated the arrival time approximately 45 seconds and started efficiently packing the expensive sensors into their shock-proof hard cases, foam inserts, locking latches, order amidst the dust. Leo, inside the cab, I ordered. Windows up, lock the doors. Is it the bad guys? Leo asked, sliding off the tailgate, clutching his iPad to his chest. There are no bad guys, Leo. Just conflicting interests. Go. The truck skidded to a halt 10 feet away. The engine died with a shudder that shook the chassis. The door slammed open, and a woman stepped out. She wasn't what I expected. The dossier on the landowner, Oakley Kelly, age 36, suggested a struggling heir, likely distressed, likely to sell. I expected someone defeated, someone tired. The woman marching toward me looked like she was carved out of the same sandstone as the cliffs behind her. She wore muddy boots that had walked 1,000 miles, jeans that had seen actual work, not fashion work, and a canvas Carhartt jacket that was 2 sizes too big for her frame. Her hair was pulled back in a severe braid, but stray strands whipped around her face in the wind. She looked furious, and she looked capable. "You're trespassing," she stated. "No hello, no preamble, efficient. I'm on a public easement," I replied, staying calm, pointing to the county road marker 20 feet away. "Knox Phillips, geo-surveyor contracted by Apex Land." "I know who you are," she said. Her voice had a texture to it, like gravel. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and tired. She scanned me, then the truck, then the Pelican cases. Her gaze softened instantly when it landed on Leo, who was peering out the window with his hands pressed against the glass. She looked back at me, the steel returning to her spine. "And I know who sent you. Tell Cassian Turner that moving the survey stakes at night doesn't change the deed. Tell him he can repaint the lines all he wants, but the land remembers." "I don't move stakes," I said, offended by the implication of bad data integrity. "I record them. And for the record, your fence line is 6 feet inside the apex claim line according to their digital plats." "Their digital plats are a lie," she said, stepping closer. She smelled like sagebrush, diesel, and rain. "The iron pipe is the law. My grandfather drove that pipe in 1950. That creek is on Kelly land." She turned to walk away, dismissing me as a non-threat, just another corporate drone in a clean vest. "Wait," I called out. "If the pipe is the true boundary, then the aquifer access belongs to you. Apex's entire hydrological model depends on that water. If they lose access, their subdivision isn't viable." She stopped. She looked back over her shoulder, her eyes narrowing against the sun. "The creek is the ranch, Mr. Phillips?" she said, her voice dropping an octave. "Without that water, the bank forecloses in 5 weeks. This isn't just a survey line. It's an eviction notice. Tell your algorithm that." She got in her truck, fired it up, and drove off toward the distant ranch house nestled at the base of the canyon. I watched her go. If she was right, and the 1,950 marker suggested she was the entire subdivision plan Apex had uploaded to my server, was invalid. A bug in the system. A massive, expensive bug. And she was on a countdown to losing everything because of a lie in the database. I climbed into the driver's seat of my rental SUV, a rugged model that looked tough but felt like plastic. I inserted the key and turned the ignition. Click, silence, click, click, click. The hollow, rattling death sound of a starter motor failing to engage. Beat 2, setup context and sidecast. We were 18 miles from the nearest paved road. The silence of the high desert rushed back in, heavy and absolute. I checked my phone. No service. I checked the satellite messenger clipped to my belt. The LED blinked orange. Searching, searching, Signal blocked. The high canyon walls were creating a dead zone, scattering the signal before it could hit the low-orbit network. Optimal outcome, I muttered to myself, tapping the steering wheel. Not achieved. I tried to call the rental company again. Call failed. I tried to call Judah, my business partner back in Denver who handled the logistics while I handled the dirt. Connecting. Call failed. Are we camping? Leo asked from the back seat, looking hopeful. He loved the idea of danger, as long as it was theoretical. No, we are not camping. We have no thermal gear rated for sub-zero temperatures, I said, checking the inventory in my head. We have 2 bottles of water, a bag of pretzels, and a thermal blanket in the first aid kit. Not sustainable for a 12-hour operational window. The sun dipped below the mesa. The light turned purple, then gray. The wind picked up, whistling through the cracked seal of the window. The temperature began to plummet. 60 degrees, 50 degrees, 20 minutes passed. Then 40. The cold began to seep into the cab. I ran the mental math on hypothermia risk for a 6-year-old. It wasn't good. The sound of an engine returned. Twin beams of yellow light cut through the dusk. The red Ford was coming back. Oakley pulled up alongside us and rolled down the window. Starter? Solenoid, I think, I said, frustrated that I couldn't fix it with a laptop or a loose connection on the terminal. I don't have the tools to bridge it. She looked at the sky. It'll be 20 degrees tonight. And the coyotes are active. A calf got taken last night just over the ridge. You can't stay out here with the boy. I can call a tow truck if I can get out of this dead zone, I said, my pride bristling. Tow truck won't come out here after dark. Liability policy, she said flatly. Road's too washed out. They'll tell you to wait for daylight. That's 12 hours, Mr. Phillips. 12 hours in a tin can at freezing temperatures. She unlocked her passenger door. The lock popped up with a solid mechanical thunk. Get in. I've got a landline at the house. I hesitated. Getting into a stranger's vehicle introduced uncalculated risks. But freezing my son was a confirmed failure state. Okay, I said. Leo, grab the drone case. The drive to her ranch house was silent. I watched her drive. She shifted gears with a fluid, practiced motion, anticipating the ruts before she hit them. High competence. I respected that. We pulled up to the house. It was a sprawling, weathered ranch style with a porch wrapped around 3 sides, piled high with firewood. It looked analog, inefficiently large, and undeniably sturdy. Do you want to stay over? She asked as she killed the engine. I blinked. Excuse me? The tow truck, she repeated slowly. They won't come until morning. You and your son. Do you want to stay over? I have a guest room. It's better than the cab of your truck. Oh, I said. That would be logical. Thank you. Beat 3. Inciting incident. The collision. She led us inside. The house was warm, heated by a massive wood stove. The guest room is down the hall. Last door on the left, she said. Make yourself at home. I have to go check the heifers. One is calving. She left us. I walked to the door she indicated. Unaware of what was waiting behind that door, I expected a bed. Maybe a nightstand. I opened the door. It wasn't a guest room. It was a disaster zone. It was an office. Or at least, it had been. Now, it was a physical manifestation of chaos. Bankers' boxes were stacked floor to ceiling, leaning precariously. Loose papers covered the bed invoices, legal notices, old maps. It looked like a paper mill had exploded inside a tornado. In the center of the chaos, a small clearing on the mattress suggested someone had been sitting there, trying to sort through it, and failing. I picked up a document from the nearest stack. It was a notice of intent to lien from the county. It was stamped twice in red ink. The second stamp cut across the page like a fresh wound. Final. Under it, a letter from Apex Land Development offering a lowball buyout. My fingers twitched toward the piles like they were loose wires, and I knew exactly how to splice them. Oakley appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. Her face flushed red. Oh, God. I'm sorry, she stammered. I pointed to the wrong door. She rushed forward, trying to gather a stack of papers. The guest room is the other left. She looked ashamed. My dad handled the books. He died 6 months ago. I know how to run the land. I know how to pull a calf in a blizzard, but I stare at these pink slips like they're written in another language. You're losing the water rights hearing because you missed the filing deadline, I said, pointing to a document. I didn't mean to be blunt. It was just a data observation. She stiffened. I didn't miss it. I couldn't find the original deed. They require the 1,950 abstract. It's probably in here, I said. Statistically speaking. I've looked, she said, her voice tight. It's gone. And if I don't produce it in 5 weeks, Cassian Turner takes the creek. And if he takes the creek, the cows die. End of story. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was fighting a war on 2 fronts, and she was losing because she didn't have the bandwidth. I felt the twitch in my fingers again. The compulsion to fix. I can digitize this, I said. What? I have a portable scanner in my gear. And OCR software. I can index this entire room in 48 hours. Create a searchable database. She stared at me. Why would you do that? You work for Apex. I work for myself, I corrected. Apex is just a client. And I don't like bad data. If you have the deed, I'll find it. And what do you want in return? She asked, suspicious. I looked at Leo, who was reading an old magazine on the floor, safe and warm. A place to stay until my truck is fixed, I said. And maybe a steak. She watched me for a long moment. Then, she nodded. Deal. But if you reorganize my bills so I can't find them, I feed you to the pigs. Beat 4. First obstacle, the resistance. The next morning, the tow truck driver called the landline. The part for my rental, a specific solenoid, had to be shipped. Estimated arrival. 4 days. 4 days, I told Oakley in the kitchen. She was frying eggs in a cast-iron skillet. The smell of bacon grease and coffee was overwhelming in a good way. Guess you're stuck, robot, she said, sliding a plate toward Leo. I set up a command center in the paper fort. I pulled out my portable Fujitsu scanner. Whir. Click. Whir. The sound became the rhythm of the room. My process was rigorous. I cleared the bed and set up 3 distinct piles. Critical, legal, tax, operational invoices, vet bills, and archive, old letters, manuals. I fed them through the machine one by one. The software crunched the data, turning physical piles into searchable PDFs. Oakley watched me from the doorway occasionally. You're shredding things, she accused. I'm shredding the 3rd copy of an electric bill from 1,998, I said without looking up. Redundancy is inefficiency. My dad kept everything. Your dad created a fire hazard, I countered. I'm creating a system. You sound like a machine. I am a highly functional human with a preference for logic. How's your heart, robot? She asked. I paused. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My wife, Sarah, had died 3 years ago. Since then, I had optimized my life to avoid pain. Functioning within normal parameters, I said tightly. She didn't push. She just set a fresh cup of coffee on the desk, right next to my elbow. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. The water heater in the bunkhouse is busted. Leo said you fix things. I went out to the bunkhouse. The water heater was a disaster. Sediment buildup had blocked the drain valve. This was simple physics. I drained the tank, watching the brown sludge sputter out. It smelled like sulfur and ancient rust. I scraped the thermocouple with a wire brush from my rock kit until the copper gleamed like new money. I retaped the gas line, my hands moving with muscle memory I hadn't used in years. Click. Whoosh. The blue flame roared to life. A perfect, efficient cone of heat. Oakley was standing behind me. You actually fixed it. Simple sediment blockage, I said. You need to flush this every 6 months. You fixed the hot water, she said, looking at me. I haven't had hot water in here since Dad died. Now you do, I said. Efficiency. Beat 5. Rising action, domesticity, and bonding. By the 3rd day, a routine had formed. I worked the papers, she worked the cattle. I fixed the Wi-Fi router by moving it out from behind a lead-lined gun cabinet who puts a router behind lead, and configuring a mesh network so she could get signal in the barn. You gave me internet in the barn? She asked, staring at her phone. Productivity increase, I said. But the real shift happened at dinner. We were cooking together. Or, rather, she was making stew, and I was reorganizing her spice rack. Cumin goes with coriander, I muttered. Group by flavor profile. Just chop the onions, Knox, she laughed. Leo ran in. Dad! Miss Oakley, let me name a calf! Oh no. What did you name it? Megatron? Leo beamed. Oakley grinned. It lit up her face. Megatron is a heifer, but she likes it. She looked at me over Leo's head. He's a good kid, Knox. You're doing a good job. He requires a lot of maintenance, I joked, but my chest felt tight. So do you, she said softly. She reached out and took the knife from my hand. Her fingers brushed mine, warmth against cold. Stop organizing the spices, she whispered. Sit down. Eat. You can't optimize a stew. That night, I found the file. Not the deed, but a handwritten journal from her grandfather. Oakley, I called out. She came into the office. What is it? I digitized the journal, I said. Entry dated August 4th, 1950. Driven the pipe deep today. Used the old cairn on Rattlesnake Ridge as the sighting line. The cairn, I said. If we can find that physical stone marker, it helps prove the pipe's original location. Physical boundary markers supersede paper maps. That's Rattlesnake Ridge, she said, pointing out the window. It's steep, and a storm is coming. My rover has centimeter-level precision, I said. I can find it, but we have to go tomorrow. Not alone, you can't, she said. I'm driving. Beat 6. The midpoint twist. We took her truck the next morning. I left Leo with Judah, my business partner who had driven up with the spare truck part. He was happy to set up his laptop on the kitchen table and play uncle for a few hours. The ride up the ridge was rough. The truck bounced violently over rocks. Why do you care? Oakley asked suddenly, gripping the wheel. You're charging Apex for the survey. Why help me prove them wrong? You could lose the contract. Because the data says they are wrong, I said. I ran a comparison. Cassian Turner shifted the boundary coordinates by 12 feet in the digital model. It's fraud. So you're doing this for the math? I'm doing it for the integrity of the data set, I said. I looked at her hands on the steering wheel. Strong hands, capable, and because you make good coffee, she smiled. It changed her whole face. We hiked the last mile. The wind was biting cold. Snow pellets started to sting my face. My GPS signal is degrading, I shouted. Atmospheric interference. Use your eyes, tech bro, she shouted back. Look for rocks that don't belong. We searched for an hour. The snow was falling harder. There, she yelled. She pointed to a pile of stones. I ran over with the metal detector. Iron, I said. Deep. I dug through the frozen ground. 2 feet down, I hit a rusty cap stamped 1950. We got it, I breathed. I set up the rover pole. Fix. Coordinates locked. Time stamped. Then the lightning cracked. Close enough to smell the ozone. We need to move. Oakley grabbed my jacket. We ran back to the truck. She turned the key. Click, click, click. The battery? She groaned. Cold snap killed it, I diagnosed. We're stuck. There's an old line shack back there, she said. It has a stove. We walk. Beat 7. Second obstacle. The storm. The walk was brutal. The snow was horizontal. We found the shack, barely standing, but the cast iron stove was solid. We huddled inside. I used pages from my waterproof notebook as kindling. We got a fire going with old fence posts. It was freezing. We have to keep warm, I said. It was a biological imperative. Hypothermia is a variable we cannot afford. Come here, she said. We sat on the floor, wrapped in a musty horse blanket she found. She sat close to me. I put my arm around her. She felt solid, real. Beat 8. Climax. Storm trap. The wind howled outside. You found the pin, she murmured, shivering. I found the data point, I corrected. You saved the ranch, Knox. I haven't uploaded it yet. You saved me, she said. She looked up at me. You came into my mess. And you, tidied it. I just optimized the workflow, I said automatically. Stop it, she whispered. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Stop hiding behind the words. You saved me. You saved me first, I said. I was stuck on the road. That was just a jumpstart. No, I said. It wasn't. My voice cracked. I've been offline since Sarah died, just processing tasks, being here, with the papers, and the water heater, and the stew. It feels like I'm finally calibrated. She reached up and touched my face. Her hand was cold, but her touch burned. You're a good dad, Knox, and a decent surveyor. I wanted to kiss her. The proximity was high, but the priority was safety. I didn't kiss her. I pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Sleep, I said. I'll watch the fire. Variable monitoring. She rested her head on my chest. Okay. Wake me if the data changes. She fell asleep. I stayed awake, feeling the weight of her against me. It was the first time in 3 years I didn't feel alone in the universe. Beat 9. Falling action. The storm broke at dawn. We hiked out. Judah met us halfway up the road in his Jeep. You good? He asked. Optimal, I said, helping Oakley into the back seat. We drove straight to the county recorder's office. I didn't even change my clothes. I walked in with mud on my boots and the GPS rover in my hand. I met with Henderson, the county surveyor. I have new survey data, I said, laying the tablet on his desk. Certified coordinates of the original 1,950 boundary markers, found, verified, and logged. Henderson adjusted his glasses. Well, I'll be damned. That puts the creek squarely on the Kelly parcel. I'm filing an emergency boundary correction affidavit, I said, and I'm requesting an immediate cease and desist on the Apex development permit pending a full review. Henderson, if you attach these raw GNSS logs to the file, a judge will sign the injunction by lunch. The math doesn't leave room for argument. Henderson stamped the form. Consider it filed. Son, as we walked out, Cassian Turner was coming in. He stopped, looking at Oakley, then me. You work for me, Phillips, he hissed. This is a breach of contract. I'm an independent contractor, I said calmly. My contract states I provide accurate data. This is the data. Also, I'm terminating our agreement effective immediately due to provision 4.2. Client provided falsified initial data sets. I looked at Oakley. She was standing by the door, smiling. It was a tired smile, but it was victorious. Beat 10. Resolution. 2 weeks later, the emergency injunction was granted. Apex's legal team, facing a fraud countersuit, had gone quiet. The immediate threat was gone. I was packing the truck. The starter was fixed. The job was done. Leo was saying goodbye to the barn cats, promising to write them letters. Oakley walked out onto the porch. She held 2 mugs of coffee. You're leaving, she stated. Job's done, I said. Survey is filed. Water rights secured. She handed me the coffee. I was thinking, this ranch. It's big. Lots of variables. The solar array is inefficient. The irrigation needs automation. I took a sip. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a contract, she said. Open-ended. Payment in stake and proximity. I have a firm in Denver, I said. Denver is 3 hours away. You have a Starlink dish. You can work from anywhere. And Leo likes the cows. I thought about Judah. He had texted me yesterday, practically begging to take over the client meetings in the city if I wanted to handle the field data indefinitely. The transition was already mapped out. I looked at Leo. He was chasing a chicken. He looked happy. Happier than he'd been in 3 years. I looked at Oakley. She wasn't just a client anymore. She was a variable I didn't want to solve. I wanted to keep her in the equation. I would need to install a mesh network for the internet, I said. The stone walls block the signal. Is that a yes? I pulled a key from my pocket. It wasn't my truck key. It was a new key I'd cut for the main gate, because the old one stuck and annoyed me. I made a copy, I said, just in case the primary fails. Redundancy? She took the key. She stepped close, invading my personal space in the best way possible. The data wasn't wrong, she said softly. echoing my first thought on the ranch. You just needed to look at the whole map. Are you working late again? She asked, a tease in her voice. No, I said, finally closing the distance, putting my hand on her waist. I kissed her. It was efficient, precise, and absolutely perfect.